In a forgotten town where crumbling houses held echoes of hardship, a globally renowned black tech billionaire, hollowed by her mother's death, encountered a 12-year-old boy begging for food. Yet when he didn't eat and hurried away, a potent curiosity compelled her to follow, leading her to the discovery of his 3 starving orphan siblings. That single chance meeting would irrevocably alter their lives, and hers, forever. Before we delve into this story, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The morning air in Willow Creek, West Virginia, was thick and heavy, carrying faint notes of pine, damp earth, and a subtle metallic tang, a lingering phantom of the area's industrial past. Sarah Thorne, a name synonymous with global tech innovation and philanthropic galas, instinctively adjusted the collar of her cashmere coat. At 35, she had forged a multi-billion-dollar empire from a college dorm coding project. But for the past 8 months since her mother's passing, a profound aching void had settled within her, an emptiness no amount of success, luxury, or high-profile charity events could possibly fill. She had arrived in Willow Creek not for a scheduled donation presentation. Her foundation had teams for that. Instead, it was an impulse, a quiet, unannounced detour from a flight to a corporate retreat in Aspen. She sought something she couldn't articulate, a tangible connection to the world beyond her gilded cage. Willow Creek offered a stark contrast to the manicured landscapes of her typical existence. Dilapidated trailers sagged on uneven ground, their aluminum skins scarred by rust and neglect. Porches listed under the weight of time, and yards were strewn with the detritus of hard-lived lives. Forgotten toys, stacks of tires, the skeletal remains of what might once have been a family car. The eyes of the few people she passed on the main street were weary, some guarded, others simply vacant. No glossy PR photos could capture this harsh reality. No polished speech could convey its silent desperation. She'd spent the early morning visiting a struggling community center, listening to the strained voices of volunteers, but the official narrative felt hollow. Restless, Sarah had slipped away, wandering down a narrow, unpaved lane that snaked deeper into the town's forgotten corners. No security detail, no personal assistant, just the crunch of gravel beneath her Italian leather boots, a sound that felt ridiculously out of place. That's when she heard it. A small, almost imperceptible cough, followed by a voice soft and hesitant just behind her. "Ma'am." She turned slowly. A black boy no older than 12 stood barefoot in the packed dirt. His faded blue t-shirt, once vibrant, now hung loosely on his alarmingly thin frame, the fabric worn almost transparent at the shoulders. His denim shorts were patched and stained. In one hand he clutched a crumpled paper bag, his knuckles white. He wasn't shouting, wasn't aggressively demanding, just standing there, his eyes a startling shade of hazel, wide and unblinking. His voice was barely a whisper. Do you have any food? Just anything left over." Sarah's throat unexpectedly tightened. She fumbled inside her designer handbag, her fingers brushing past her satellite phone and a diamond-studded compact before settling on a wrapped protein bar she'd packed that morning, an impulse grab from the hotel breakfast buffet. Without a second thought, she pulled it out and extended it to him. The boy's face, etched with a maturity far beyond his years, flickered with something akin to disbelief, then a profound, silent gratitude. "Oh, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much." He took the bar, his fingers barely brushing hers, then carefully placed it inside his paper bag. To Sarah's surprise, he didn't tear it open, didn't even glance at it. Instead, he turned and began to hurry down the lane, moving with a silent urgency, as if he had somewhere critically important to be. Something inside Sarah tugged, a strange, persistent pull she couldn't ignore. This wasn't the aggressive, opportunistic panhandling she sometimes witnessed on city streets. This was different. He hadn't asked for money, only food, and he hadn't eaten it. She hesitated for a moment, then, driven by an instinct she rarely trusted, she began to follow him. Through a labyrinth of overgrown paths and crumbling asphalt, past trailers leaning precariously, past abandoned cars swallowed by weeds, she trailed behind him at a careful distance. The deeper they went, the more desolate the surroundings became. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Why was he rushing? She wondered, her mind racing. Who was waiting for him? Was he even alone? Her boots, designed for boardroom carpets and polished marble, slipped on the loose gravel, forcing her to pick her way carefully, her muscles unaccustomed to such uneven terrain. The silence of the place, broken only by the distant caw of a crow or the faint hum of power lines, felt oppressive, almost watchful. Finally the boy stopped. He stood before a tiny sun-baked shack, not much more than a shed fashioned from salvaged plywood and corrugated tin. It was smaller and more broken than any structure she had seen, yet even in this impoverished landscape its makeshift door, patched with what looked like an old license plate, hung slightly askew on rusted hinges. Sarah's heart began to pound, a strange, insistent rhythm against her ribs. She stopped several meters away, partially hidden by a rusted-out pickup truck, watching. The boy glanced around, his head cocked as if listening, then with a quiet swiftness he slipped inside. Sarah crept closer, her curiosity now an undeniable compulsion. She wasn't sure why, only that she had to see. When she reached the doorway and carefully peered inside, her breath hitched, a gasp caught in her throat, raw and painful. Tears sprang instantly to her eyes, blurring the dim, desolate scene before her. Inside the single cramped room, which smelled faintly of damp earth, stale air, and something acrid like unwashed sickness, she saw them. 3 tiny children, all younger than the boy, lay curled on a grimy blanket spread on the dirt floor. There were no beds, no furniture to speak of, only a few discarded plastic containers and a threadbare curtain hanging over a broken window. Their arms were wrapped around each other, as if seeking warmth or comfort from their shared vulnerability. Their faces were hollowed, their eyes dull, far too large for their small, skeletal frames. They radiated an almost palpable hunger. One child, a girl no older than 3, coughed weakly, a dry, rattling sound that seemed to tear through the quiet. Another, a boy barely more than a toddler, stared blankly at the peeling plywood wall, his thumb listlessly in his mouth. There were no adults, no signs of food anywhere. The boy, the one who had asked her for food, knelt beside them. With painstaking care he opened the paper bag. He didn't hesitate, didn't even look at the protein bar. Gently he broke it into small, manageable pieces. Then with a tenderness that shattered Sarah's composure, he handed the first pieces to the youngest children. "Eat, little ones," he whispered, his voice devoid of any hint of self-pity or resentment. "Eat slowly." Sarah's knees trembled violently. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth, trying to stifle the sob that clawed its way up her throat. Tears spilled freely, hot tracks down her cheeks. There alone, she realized with a sickening lurch of her stomach. Completely, terrifyingly alone. And this small boy, barely more than a child himself, was trying to keep them alive, day after day, in this crumbling shell of a home. He wasn't begging for himself. He was a provider, a protector, a tiny, fragile anchor for 3 even more fragile lives. She staggered back from the doorway, choking on a sob, her body shaking uncontrollably. Her meticulously ordered world, the one filled with strategic investments, philanthropic galas, and the carefully curated illusion of purpose, felt utterly meaningless, a hollow sham. She had come here seeking meaning, a vague, undefined sense of fulfillment, and now in this broken place, she had found something that didn't just fill her heart, but shattered it into a million pieces. In that raw, agonizing moment, she knew with an absolute, undeniable certainty that she would not walk away. Her chest ached, her throat tightened painfully. Where were the parents? How long had these children been surviving alone? What kind of system had allowed this to happen? The questions swirled, a maelstrom in her mind, but they were secondary to the single overwhelming imperative. She had to act. She could not move, not until her heart made the definitive choice for her. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing tears and dust, and slowly, deliberately approached the sagging door. She knocked softly, her knuckles brushing against the splintered wood. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse, breaking with emotion. "Sweetheart, my name is Sarah. May I come in?" There was a long, silent pause. Then the door creaked open slightly and the boy's hazel eyes peeked out. Caution flickered in their depths, a lifetime of learned suspicion, but then a faint spark of recognition. The woman who had given him the food. Without a word, he slowly, almost imperceptibly, nodded. Sarah stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim, oppressive light. The smell of damp earth, stale sweat, and an unmistakable cloying scent of sickness filled the tiny room, assaults on her senses she would never forget. The 3 younger children huddled together on the floor stared up at her, their eyes wide and weary, too weak, too malnourished, too traumatized to react with anything more than a blank, unblinking gaze. The smallest, the girl who had coughed, whimpered softly, a tiny, pained sound that tore at Sarah's heart. Sarah knelt slowly, carefully, her cashmere coat brushing against the dirt floor. Her voice, gentle and low, was a stark contrast to the urgency she felt boiling inside her. "My name is Sarah," she repeated, offering a small, reassuring smile that felt foreign on her trembling lips. "Can you tell me yours?" The boy hesitated, his gaze shifting to his younger siblings, a flicker of protectiveness in his eyes. Then he whispered, his voice barely audible, "I'm Leo. And this is Mia," he gestured to the smallest girl, "and Tom and Lily," he pointed to the two other children. Sarah's heart clenched, a physical pain. "Where is your mother, Leo?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. His small chin quivered, a tremor that seemed to ripple through his entire fragile frame. He looked down, his eyes fixed on the dirt floor as if the ground held the answers. Mama got very sick many weeks ago," he mumbled, his voice cracking. "She stopped breathing. I tried to get help. I ran to the road, but no one came. Not for us." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "And your father?" she managed to ask, dread pooling in her stomach. Leo's eyes dimmed further, losing the last vestiges of childhood innocence. "Gone before Mia was born. He just left." Sarah felt her stomach twist, a knot of grief and outrage. "How long have you been taking care of them?" He wanted to scream. How long had this been their reality? Leo's thin shoulders rose and fell with a weary sigh. "Since Mama went to the sky. I get food when I can. Sometimes Mr. Johnson from the store gives me old bread. Sometimes I find things in the woods." Tears blurred Sarah's vision once more, fresh and hot. This child, no older than 12, had somehow been keeping his 3 younger siblings alive in this broken house, day after day, with no one to help him, no one even aware of their plight. Her mind reeled with the enormity of it. She couldn't leave them here, but taking action in a foreign country, or even a forgotten corner of her own, wasn't simple. She needed help, and she needed it fast. Pulling herself together, drawing on the same steely resolve that had built her empire, Sarah stood. She looked at Leo, her gaze steady, compassionate. "Leo," she said, her voice firmer now, betraying none of the internal turmoil, "would you trust me if I said I wanted to help you? All of you?" The boy looked at her, his hazel eyes uncertain, wary. But then, slowly, faintly, he nodded. It was a tiny, fragile gesture of hope, a desperate trust in a stranger. Sarah pulled out her satellite phone. With trembling fingers, she took a deep breath, trying to calm the frantic pounding of her heart. She began making calls. To her executive assistant Mark, who usually handled the logistics of her sprawling life. To a trusted legal contact specializing in child welfare law. To local authorities listed online. Her voice, surprisingly steady, explained the grave situation, cutting through the initial skepticism. She used her name, her foundation's name, pulling every string, leveraging every connection she had. She demanded attention, resources, immediate intervention. Within an hour, a small motley crowd had gathered near the shack. Mark, ever efficient, had dispatched a local private investigator and a pro bono lawyer to the scene, who then contacted social services and local law enforcement. A local aid worker, a sturdy older woman with kind, weary eyes named Martha, rushed forward, her face etched with shock and disbelief. "By God!" Martha gasped, her voice thick with emotion as she knelt by the children. We didn't know there were children alone here." It was a stark reminder of how easily the most vulnerable could slip through the cracks, hidden in plain sight. Soon more hands were inside the house, moving with quiet efficiency. Members of the local volunteer fire department, called in by the sheriff's deputy, brought in fresh bottles of water and soft blankets. A medic, a young woman from the nearest clinic, gently examined the children. The youngest, Mia, had a dangerously high fever, but the medic confirmed she would survive with proper care. All 3 were severely malnourished, their ribs starkly visible beneath their papery skin, but their vital signs, though weak, were stable. As Martha organized transport to the nearest proper clinic, a small, understaffed facility an hour's drive away, Sarah knelt by Leo once more. She reached out her hand, hovering for a moment before gently resting it on his thin shoulder. "I will not leave you, Leo," she promised softly, looking directly into his exhausted eyes. "You are not alone anymore. None of you are. I promise." Leo's eyes, which had remained dry through all the revelations, now filled with tears. But for the first time, Sarah saw something else there too. A faint, fragile spark of hope, a possibility he hadn't dared to imagine. He didn't say anything, but he leaned almost imperceptibly into her touch. That night, after seeing the children safely to the clinic where they were immediately put on 4 fluids and given nutrient-rich food, Sarah sat alone in her surprisingly modest guest room at the town's only motel. The room, with its faded floral wallpaper and worn carpet, was a universe away from her usual 5-star suites. Her heart was still pounding, a dull throb against her ribs. Her world, once filled with the intricate dance of designer clothes, high-stakes negotiations, and shallow parties, suddenly felt small, foolish, utterly insignificant. She had come here seeking purpose, a vague antidote to her grief and emptiness. She had found it, undeniably, in the silent courage of a little boy who had nothing left but an unwavering love for his siblings. The next morning, Sarah made another decision, one that would shock her board members, her employees, and her millions of followers back home. She didn't just cancel her return flight. She postponed her entire schedule indefinitely. She informed Mark that she would be staying in Willow Creek. Her initial plan had been a brief philanthropic detour. Now, it was a reordering of her entire life's trajectory. She stayed to ensure the children's care not just for a few days but for the long haul. She worked tirelessly, immersed in a new, unfamiliar world of local bureaucracy, social services, and child welfare laws. She spent hours at the clinic, sitting by the children's bedsides, watching them slowly regain strength. Leo, initially reserved, began to open up, telling her stories of his mother, of the tricks he used to find food, of the unspoken fear that had haunted their every waking moment. Mia and Tom, once listless, began to show faint smiles, their eyes slowly regaining their spark. Lily, the youngest, would reach out her tiny hand for Sarah's, a gesture that brought tears to Sarah's eyes every single time. Sarah's days were a blur of meetings with social workers, lawyers, and community leaders. She uncovered the deep-rooted issues plaguing Willow Creek: systemic poverty, the fallout from a devastating economic downturn, and a severe lack of resources for vulnerable families. The legal hurdles to gain temporary, then permanent custody of the children were immense. There were distant relatives who needed to be tracked down, background checks to be run, and extensive court proceedings. She found herself fighting against a system that, while well-intentioned, was often slow, underfunded, and overwhelmed. She hired the best legal team, funding their work out of her own pocket, to navigate the labyrinthine legal requirements. She also began to invest in the community itself, realizing that saving these 4 children was just a drop in an ocean of need. She established a dedicated fund, the Willow Creek Children's Trust, under her foundation's umbrella. It wasn't about flying in with a check. It was about rebuilding the broken support system from the ground up. She funded a new community kitchen, improved the local clinic's resources, and initiated programs to support families at risk. Her team, initially bewildered by her sudden radical shift in focus, quickly adapted, seeing the raw passion that now fueled her. Her tech company, run by a capable CEO, continued to thrive, but her personal mission had fundamentally changed. Months bled into a year. The children, under Sarah's direct care and the watchful eyes of the clinic staff and Martha, flourished. Their hollowed faces filled out. Their eyes became bright with curiosity and joy. Leo, no longer burdened by the weight of the world, began to act like a child again, though the quiet maturity he had developed never truly left him. He excelled in the small makeshift school Sarah helped establish, showing a keen intelligence and an eagerness to learn. After what felt like an endless series of legal hurdles, emotional interviews, and extensive home visits, the day finally arrived. The court granted Sarah Thorne full formal adoption of Leo, Mia, Tom, and Lily. It was a quiet proceeding in a small county courthouse, far from the glare of the media, attended only by Sarah, the children, Martha, and Sarah's lead lawyer. When the judge's gavel finally fell, a profound sense of peace washed over Sarah, a feeling deeper and more satisfying than any corporate acquisition or philanthropic award she had ever received. She didn't take them back to her sprawling mansion in California immediately. Instead, she had purchased and meticulously renovated a large, comfortable house just outside Willow Creek, ensuring it had plenty of space, a safe yard, and a quiet room for each child. It was a home, not just a house, filled with laughter, the smell of home-cooked meals, and the joyous chaos of children finally allowed to be children. Leo helped her choose the colors for the walls. Tom insisted on a bunk bed. Mia loved the soft, plush toys, and Lily simply radiated happiness in her presence. Her charity foundation expanded its reach dramatically. No longer just a conduit for large-scale, impersonal donations, inspired by that single life-altering day and the profound choice she had made, it became a pioneering model for community-specific long-term aid, focusing on root causes and direct, tangible support for vulnerable children and families in forgotten towns across the nation. Sarah Thorne's life was no longer empty. The void left by her mother's passing had been filled, not with fleeting success or material possessions, but with a purpose so profound, so visceral, that it reshaped her very existence. She had chosen not to walk away from the heartbreaking reality she stumbled upon, and in doing so she had not only saved 4 precious lives but had also found her own true meaning. If you found this story touching and inspiring, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected tales of human connection and resilience. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. We love hearing from all of you. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching for the unseen depths in our world. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.